My brother cleared out my savings account to pay off his gambling debts, and somehow my parents convinced me to forgive him. But when he did something even worse, I decided to expose him in front of everyone at Thanksgiving dinner. A few years ago, my brother asked for my credit card, saying he needed to order takeout because his card was locked. Instead of using it for food, he accessed my savings account and cleared out every dime to pay off his gambling debt. These savings were meant for a down payment on a house, but they were gone in an instant. When I found out, I lost it. I locked myself in my apartment, started drinking, and sent him a text saying I hated him and that he could rot in hell. The next morning, my parents showed up at my place. They told me what my brother did was forgivable because family is more important than money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I yelled that, of course, they would say that he's their golden boy who can do no wrong. When my mom started crying her usual crocodile tears and saw that I wasn't budging, she began screaming at me. At that point, I kicked them out, telling them they could go to hell just like my brother. He had taken over $75,000 from me, and now I had to renew my apartment lease for another year when I should have been using that money on a house. It had taken me years to save that money, and it was gone just like that. Whenever my parents complained that I hadn't visited them in a while, I reminded them it was because of Jim. They would respond by saying I'd regret it when I was old and gray, and that I should cherish the time we have together because life is short. I told them they were welcome to visit me anytime, though, truthfully, I didn't want them to. I just wasn't playing their game anymore. Then, my mom brought up how Jim had said he missed me and that he still loved little Sarah, the toddler they used to clean up after whenever I got spaghetti in my hair. She told that story often, about how I threw spaghetti everywhere when I was a baby, and Jim, who was about 12 at the time, helped clean me up. Hearing that story again softened me a little, and in a moment of weakness, I decided to give Jim another chance, but this time with boundaries. Forgiving him took time. As weeks passed, it still hurt to think about him or see his face because I was reminded that the money for my first house was gone. I tried to be civil, and my parents appreciated the effort. They invited me to more family dinners and game nights, hoping things could go back to how they were before. Slowly, the trust between Jim and me began to rebuild. We even started doing things together again, like going ziplining, a favorite pastime of ours when we were teenagers. There's a zipline near our parents' house that starts from a cliff and drops you into a lake. It was terrifying every time, but the thrill made it fun, especially with Jim by my side. After one of our ziplining adventures, we stopped at a fast food place. As I was about to pay, I realized my main credit card was missing. I checked my pockets and wallet but couldn't find it. Jim asked if everything was okay, and when I told him, he offered to pay for our meal with his card. I figured I must have dropped my card at the zipline place. Later, when I got home, I checked my wallet again and found the card in a different pocket from where I normally keep it. I thought I was just tired and had misplaced it, so I went to bed. The next night, I received a text message from my credit card company asking for authorization for a transaction at a casino near my parents' house, the same casino Jim frequented every other Friday. My heart sank. I couldn't believe he had done it again. I declined the transaction immediately and checked my other accounts. He must have taken photos of my credit cards and returned them to my wallet after our outing. All my credit card apps showed I had hit my limit for the month, which I knew wasn't the case. When I tried to dispute the charges, the merchants had proof that Jim was the one making the purchases, so my disputes were denied, and I was left responsible for the debt. I called my brother, but he didn't answer. The call clicked as if he had declined it. I was furious. I immediately called my mom and told her what Jim had done, that he had racked up $7,000 in debt across all my credit cards. She said she would talk to him and call me back after. I told her there was no need because I was heading over right away. It was almost 11 o'clock at night, and when I got to my parents' house, I waited in the living room for Jim to come home. When he walked through the door and saw me sitting there, he was startled. I asked him where my money was, and he acted confused. I told him I knew he had stolen my credit card information and threatened to call the police if he didn't tell me where the money was. He broke down and confessed. He said he felt terrible about me not being able to buy my first house because of what he did the first time, and he thought he could make it up to me by gambling to win the money back. Of course, he lost everything again. I was furious. I asked him how he could do this to me again if he really felt so bad about the first time. That's when my parents came downstairs. My mom tried to calm the situation, but I was beyond that. Jim had stolen my down payment and left me with massive credit card debt. I told them that my chances of buying a house in the next few years were now slim to none. My parents had nothing to say about Jim's actions. He apologized profusely, but there was no way to fix this. I cut him off for good that night. I told all of them not to contact me again because I was done with them. In the weeks that followed, I got my updated credit report, and my score had dropped by over 100 points. The loan I had applied for was no longer available, and I was forced to take on a second job on top of my full-time 9-to-5 just to manage the debt. I was determined to save enough to buy my house and live the life I wanted, but it was exhausting. My phone rang constantly during that time, with calls from my parents and Jim, but I ignored them all. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have had to work such long hours to pay off this debt. The worst part was that Jim didn't even offer to help me pay it off. He justified his actions by saying that since his intention was to win money for me, he didn't feel responsible for the debt. I could never trust him again. I tried time and time again, and just when I thought we were making progress, he would betray me all over again. As I worked off the debt, the second job helped me pay it down faster, but it also took a toll on my mental health. I was coming home exhausted, getting only 4 hours of sleep each night, then waking up to go to my first job at 6 a.m. This cycle continued until I reached a somewhat comfortable spot in my finances. Once I had saved up enough, I quit the second job and cut back on my expenses as much as possible. By October, Halloween decorations were popping up in people's yards. My parents called me for the fourth time that week, I finally picked up the phone, and they were relieved to hear my voice. They said they missed seeing me and talked about how Halloween used to be my favorite holiday. We'd carve pumpkins as a family, watch Halloween specials on TV, and make ghost-shaped cookies with hot cocoa. My dad would always put up the decorations in the yard, and we'd have a great time together. My mom said she really wanted to see me again, and I told her that if she wanted to visit, they were welcome to come over to my place. The following week, my parents came over, and we had a normal conversation without addressing the elephant in the room, Jim. After a while, my mom brought up Thanksgiving. She said they were hosting it this year and really wanted me to come. I told her I wasn't interested, but she promised there would be no drama, just a family gathering like old times. I thought about whether I could even stand to see Jim again without wanting to punch him. I refused, but then my dad chimed in. He rarely asked for anything more than once, but this time he practically begged me to forgive Jim. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go to Thanksgiving. They were overjoyed, hugging and kissing me, assuring me that Jim would never pull something like that again and that I was safe from any of his shenanigans. I wasn't ready to let Jim off the hook, but I agreed to attend Thanksgiving dinner to make my parents happy. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I felt incredibly isolated from my family. I saw them on social media going out for meals and posting about their game nights, and it stung that I wasn't part of it. But I knew why I stayed away. My trust in them had been shattered. Financially, I was still struggling, juggling bills and dealing with the mess Jim had caused. As Thanksgiving approached, I began reconsidering whether I should go at all. I called my mom, hoping to back out, but she was so excited and told me she'd already told the entire family I would be there. My plan to skip Thanksgiving was shot. When Thanksgiving arrived, I was filled with dread as I drove to my parents' house. My stomach was in knots, and I had no appetite. I feared that anything I ate would come right back up. As I walked in, I saw my family gathered at the dinner table, laughing and enjoying each other's company like nothing had ever happened. My brother Jim acted like everything was normal, smiling and trying to make small talk as if the past had been forgotten. He even attempted to crack jokes with me, which only made me angrier. Watching him laugh and enjoy the evening while I was still drowning in debt because of him made my blood boil. The fact that I had to leave right after dinner to get enough sleep for my early morning shift, while he lived carefree, enraged me. He was the reason I couldn't buy my house, and there he was, having a good time as if nothing was wrong. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Toward the end of dinner, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked straight at Jim and began unloading everything I had been holding inside. I told him how he had ruined me financially, how I was forced to work 2 jobs just to stay afloat, and how I could never trust him again. I told him that I was done pretending like everything was okay, and I was done forgiving him. Then I turned to my parents. I called them out for enabling Jim's behavior for years, choosing to sweep his mistakes under the rug in the name of family unity, while completely disregarding my well-being. I asked them how that was fair. The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Jim tried to laugh it off, saying, "Come on, that's all in the past." But I wasn't having it. I cut him off and told him I was done with him for good. He was no longer welcome in my life, and I was through with all the empty apologies. I stormed out of the house, thinking I'd have to deal with the fallout on my own. But over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Other family members started reaching out to me. They apologized for not having supported me sooner and said they had no idea how bad things had gotten. Some even offered to help me financially, trying to make up for what Jim had done. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about finally being seen and heard by my family after all these years of being overlooked. I had thought I would be alone in this, but it turned out that not everyone was willing to turn a blind eye to Jim's behavior. While it didn't fix everything, it felt good to know that at least some people in my family were on my side, and I wasn't completely alone in this fight. Cutting Jim out of my life was the hardest decision I had ever made, but it was also the best one. I finally took control of my life, setting boundaries and refusing to let anyone, family or not, treat me so carelessly ever again.